In this last example of section 3.2 on the graphs of a function, we just want to develop a little bit of intuition about what we would expect a function to look like, what the graph of the function would look like based on how it's described, on the application described. And we want to be able to assign the correct axes to the variables in the problem. So in A, we have wages earned as a function of hours worked. Now, we're not going to plot points or anything. We're just going to free sketch what we think this would look like. But first, let's label the axes. So wages as a function of hours. Remember? So we talk about y being a function of x. So that can help you with this. Y is a function of x. So if wages is a function of hours, then of course that means hours would be our x, and wages would be our y axis. And what would you expect that to look like? Well, we'd expect some kind of increasing line like this, as more hours worked, more wages earned, right? So we would expect it to look something like that. Just drawing some line going, increasing somewhere in this graph. We don't have actual numbers, but just visually, that's what we would expect to happen. Okay? B, the height of a ball thrown into the air as a function of time. Height as a function of time, right? So height would be our y-axis, y as a function of x, right? Now, what do we expect that to do? So the height, we'd expect it to start at 0, right? If it's just starting from the ground. And of course it would increase over time, but what happens with a ball thrown into the air is, of course, gravity comes into play, and eventually you come back down. So we'd expect this parabolic shape. And finally, the demand for a model of cell phone as a function of price, okay? Demand, function of price. Y is a function of x. So price and demand. Now, we've talked about an example like this before. It's decreasing, right? We talked about that. We said as the price goes up, there'll be less demand. If you take an economics course, it's not going to show you a strict decreasing line. It usually looks something like this, but it's definitely decreasing. As price goes up, it decreases. So it looks something like that. Okay, so that's just to give us some thoughts on applications and what we would expect those functions to look like.